everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I'm Carly Riley, and today on the show, I have two very special guests. I have the co-founders of Feature, a Web3 studio that's powering creators and brands and the future of entertainment. Y'all know I love to talk about IP and entertainment and the metaverse and NFTs, so that is what today's topic will be about. We have Steven Ilous. Did I screw up that pronunciation, my friend?
Nope.
I
You did it
didn't.
right. Yeah, that's
Okay,
good.
you've worked with big names, Stan Lee, Kanye West. I mean, you've got a long history, impressive history in the entertainment space. Also with me, Dennis Alshuler. Did I get your last name right, Dennis, too? Am I
That's
two
right.
for two here?
Yep.
Damn, I'm on a roll. Dennis is an entrepreneur. He was on the finance team at TrueCar, former VP of strategy and business development at ZipRecruiter, worked with multiple startups, and now, of course, is the co-founder at Feature.
Hi, Carly. Great to be here.
Awesome. All right. Before we dive in, you guys caught my attention because you are the marketplace that's powering this Coinbase casting situation. Coinbase is casting apes in a 3-part trilogy they are producing, and y'all are part of the engine that's powering that. I really want to talk about how that came together and what you think this means for the future of the space, as well as just broadly about Hollywood as an industry and how NFTs may be disrupting it. But before we get into all that good stuff, we need to hear a word from our wonderful sponsors.
If you're starting on your NFT journey, you need MetaMask. This is your tool to unlock the world of DeFi and NFTs without giving up custody over your private keys. MetaMask is both a secure in-browser wallet and also a secure bridge for your hardware wallet so that you can connect to any Web3 enabled website. You can now trade tokens with any DEX or aggregator. MetaMask Swap gathers real-time pricing information across the DeFi exchange ecosystem, allowing you to select your best price while getting all of the MetaMask benefits of self-custody, lower gas costs, and increased transaction success rates. MetaMask also has a fantastic mobile wallet, which I use while I'm out and about. And I use it to collect POAPs, NFTs, and use it for all my DeFi things while I'm away from home. If you haven't downloaded MetaMask, you gotta try it out. Download MetaMask for desktop and mobile at metamask.io, or load up your Ledger, Trezor, Keystone, or Lattice hardware wallets so that they too can get into Web3. RARIBLE is the NFT platform that's leading the charge into the multi-chain universe ahead of us. Available on Flow, Tezos, Polygon, and of course Ethereum, RARIBLE is the perfect place for NFT newcomers, profile picture collectors, and experienced NFT traders. RARIBLE has a variety of NFT features that set it apart from other NFT marketplaces. They have a native messaging function allowing you to DM your friends or haggle with sellers. They also have a mobile app on iOS and Android with a built-in NFT portfolio tracker tool so you can easily check the value of your digital art portfolio. RARIBLE is built on the RARIBLE protocol, a multi-purpose, open source, and community-governed NFT protocol that helps build products and services across the NFT ecosystem, including white label marketplaces tailored to specific NFT communities. So go to rarible.com and start discovering and trading NFTs, putting in floor bids to join PFP communities, and DM with some brand new internet friends.
All right. Well, welcome to both of you. Dennis, Steven, really appreciate y'all hopping on here.
Thanks for having
Thanks.
us.
Okay. I said this earlier. Your platform, you've launched a licensing marketplace, essentially, and I want you guys to really clarify what this is. But I came across it partly through our friend John Rogers, and partly because it's being used by Coinbase right now. Coinbase is producing a 3-part trilogy. They are casting Bored Apes and also World of Women. Do I have that, or is it just apes that they're casting?
Just Bored Apes and maybe some other projects in the future.
Okay. And maybe some other projects in the future in this film, and they are using your licensing marketplace to connect with Bored Ape holders who want to license their ape to Coinbase. Did I get that right? Do you want to give your description of what's going on here? Dennis, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we partnered with Coinbase and the team and their agency, Invisible North, to provide the technology that would allow Bored Ape holders to submit their apes through a casting call and through our technology to be in the film. And so what that means is the technology that we provided verifies that they own the ape within the wallet that they have, and that they get to create a name and a backstory for their ape, and then submit that through our technology to Coinbase. Coinbase then went and selected the winners that they wanted to, and then we took those licensing agreements, put them on chain, and minted them on chain, and created 2 different licensing agreements tied to NFTs. That one goes to the licensee, which would be Coinbase, and one goes to the licensor, which would be the ape holder that was selected.
And how many apes were selected?
They selected 7 winners to start.
Okay. And I believe it was 10K was what they were offering. So that was upfront. You knew $10,000 if your ape was cast in this film.
That's right. 10,000 in either ape coin or Bitcoin.
It seemed to me like I saw some debate happening within the ape community. Some people feeling like $10,000 was a great deal to get for your ape, which was my first reaction. I saw this and I was like, oh my God, this is so game changing. This is just the next level of owning NFTs and what it means to be an NFT holder. And $10,000 is amazing. But it seemed like other people were disappointed or like my ape is worth more than $10,000. Steven, did you follow that? Were you kind of tracking that debate? What do you think it means for sort of what we're seeing here happen on a macro level?
Well, I think that on a macro level, it's the first time that this kind of transaction is happening for people, and they're unsure about, what does that mean? What are the terms? And really, there's an educational component that's part of this conversation. And I think it's healthy debate. And sometimes just people think that their apes are worth more than that to appear in a trilogy. So it was, I think the conversation is healthy though.
You talk about putting the licensing on chain sort of after the fact can you explain sort of how you've gone about thinking about on chain, off chain throughout this process? Maybe get a little bit more in the weeds on that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's very important. I think for Feature, we're always trying to think in a Web3 native way, especially with blockchain being really I would say a foundational level of system to allow for transactions to take place. And so, as much of the process that would be traditionally off chain, to be able to bring that on chain with the transparency and the security is really a tenet of what Feature is trying to accomplish here. And I think that establishing those rails and systems will allow for more transaction volume to occur within the IP licensing, market.
So specifically, when you talk about what historically would have been done off chain and now it's on chain, is this an automated payment process? You've got a smart contract now that will enforce the terms of this agreement where the $10,000 will automatically show up once a triggering event occurs, whereas previously it would have been a more manual, like, okay, it's happened now. We've got lawyers that'll enforce this process and make sure it goes through rather than an algorithm. Is that specifically what you're talking about?
I think it's the payment is one part of that. It's engaging in selecting the intellectual property that you want to acquire on chain, and then the execution of that contract, whether that's through DocuSign or just through acquiring it automatically. So using the payment as as equal to a wet signature. And so really automating that process of accepting the deal and transferring the money. And we believe that those can work in tandem as opposed to traditionally you would be like, okay, we agree on the terms, we sign a contract and the check is in the mail or the wire will be coming.
And then you're relying on your legal team or whatever. Like that's your recourse if it hasn't actually happened. Whereas here you can watch it happening in real time, sort of on the blockchain. That's sort of those broader rails. Is there more to those broader rails that you're excited about setting up, Steven, that you were referencing earlier?
Yeah, I think on a very, on a high level here, if we think about the traditional licensing process, it's so antiquated, right? We're taking an abstract concept of something like life rights or even just commercial rights. And then you're really creating a legal framework on a paper document that establishes the rules of how that transaction will work. And really, it's where it's enforceable, right? What district will you go to court to, mediate the issue? And we think that that process is essentially low level programming. And if you can bring that process to the blockchain into the smart contract, that really provides the rails and systems for higher volume transactions to occur with intellectual property that has become essentially which has become decentralized.
When you talk about higher volumes occurring, uh, maybe this is obvious, but I just want to make it explicit. It's like, if you can streamline this process, essentially get the lawyers out of the picture, the expense of lawyers out of the picture, the grayness around, will, if somebody licenses my IP, for example, will I properly be paid for all the use cases they're using it for? Like, do I need to go track all of those use cases down? All of that's embedded in the system as it exists today. Getting rid of that inevitably must create just higher volume, because you've just gotten rid of so much friction. Is that what you mean?
I think the difference here is that you still need lawyers, right? What was the actual deal? And we think there's a level of standardization that can come out of this, and that's part of the evolution of the people who hold the IP understanding more about what intellectual property actually means, but also in terms of creating a framework and essentially, yes, through that process of streamlining the offering, the negotiation process, even, and the ability to buy on with one click, and leveraging wallets as the form of wet signature, you can streamline that process and ultimately increase volume in something that was a really antiquated system.
Dennis, let me ask you on this negotiation piece. One argument I've heard is platforms like yours will be important, or maybe have a really important role to play in this future where everybody's a stage mom, because we all hold NFTs that are getting cast in things. Because you do have an individual. If I'm an individual ape holder, I'm certainly at a disadvantage negotiating against Coinbase, who have lawyers and expertise and access to whatever they want and resources. Do you see your role in this partly as um, helping to get fair terms for the NFT holder as they negotiate with people with a lot more experience and resources?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what we're trying to do is set up the system, as Steven said, where it is standardized, and so there's that trust in the system that will allow for more transactions to happen. But there are going to be cases where we're going to need custom contracts, and lots of brands today are still requiring their own custom contracts and custom paper. So the thought is, how do we create that structure so in the early days that the brands and companies can get comfort that they're protected by using their paper and some standardized terms, and then we can set up a system so that a lot of these new kind of license holders and new people to the space can be educated on what it means, how the terms work, etc. And so as we start to build our smart contract out more, we think there's an opportunity to convert more and more of a standard contract into features and functionality of a smart contract on the blockchain. And so one example of that is, if you own an ape and you enter a license contract, what happens to excuse me, and you sell that ape to somebody else, right? What happens to those licenses? Well, we've built in the solution now that those licenses basically follow the ape and will transfer, right? So there's new ways to create functionality into the smart contracts that were covered in maybe a different way with traditional contracts.
I'm processing this in real time. So if that license that belongs to my ape and I now sell my ape to Steven, the licensing rights transferring, do we know the licensing rights are going to be standard because of what Yuga Labs has outlined? Or like, I may want to apply different rights to my ape than Steven might, and he'd have to go in and then change those now that he's the ape holder?
Well, these are rights and licenses that were already basically completed, right? That are are live.
Universal.
Yeah, that are universal, but that are in effect, like the contract is in effect, right? So, but if you want to sell your ape to Steven, then what happens to those agreements, right? That you had.
Oh. I'm catching up. I'm a little slow today.
Yeah, no problem.
I've been running on little sleep. So licenses in terms of if I was getting some sort of recurring revenue, for example, for my ape, and I was on a recurring basis, Coinbase was paying me out $1,000 a month instead of one $10,000 lump sum, and then my ape gets sold to you, that recurring revenue would now transfer to you as the new owner rather than me as the old owner. That's really what it's about.
That's right. And so we talk about this transferability of the licenses, which is important, and we've built that into our technology today. The an interesting point about the royalty piece is we think that's in the future, because right now most revenue associated with licenses is off chain. So there's a whole if we were to do royalties tied to that, there'd be a whole off-chain reporting requirement, which we think today is a little bit too tough to implement. So that's why we've set it up where the licenses are sold for an upfront amount, and that's standardized. But think about in the future where a lot of these licenses could be where the revenue is coming from other metaverses, other marketplaces, other solutions, where we are able to track those royalties and those transaction values on chain. And then in that scenario, we would be able to set up the royalties tied to licenses. So this is kind of a first step of getting these licenses on chain, and then build these mechanisms as the ecosystem develops.
This is so exciting to me because this is the tooling that we need to unlock a lot across a number of industries. I interviewed M. Shadows, who's the frontman of Avenged Sevenfold, and one of the sort of aha moments I've been having is just realizing over and over again how a lot of what's holding us back is like our legal infrastructure or antiquated structures that have contracts in place that can't just be unwound. So like the music industry, we're a little ways away from fulfilling our Web3 dreams in the music industry just because of the way all the contracts are, everything's already been written. But down the line, something like this for new artists, having smart contracts where your fans could automatically get royalties based on plays on your song, that sort of recurring revenue royalty licensing, like I think this unlocks so much. Steven, I'd love to hear from you specifically when it comes to like licensing out your NFT to be used in commercials or TV or film. How big is this opportunity, do you think, really? Like, is this going to become super commonplace, or will this be, an awesome and powerful niche thing that happens?
That's a big question. Well, I think what's interesting about NFTs is that they come, uh, they cross over into so many different markets, right? You have the traditional merchandising component, which is massive for intellectual property, and then you have the uh, content side or the media side, which is obviously big. And so, because of those synergies, and now you've decentralized the intellectual property to allow somebody to hold those rights, I think that we're going to unlock a lot of opportunities that cross over between um, those two sectors. And so it's hard at this vantage point to really, take it all in, but I can see the opportunity now because it's being unlocked, and you have these systems for brands and companies, and even just rights holders, people that want to go collect a bunch of great rights that are existing coming out of Web3 early on, maybe with the foresight of saying, I can leverage these as an IP library down the road. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity that's going to come out of this. And from our initial conversations with people in the brand space or merchandising or even the media space, the media side, Hollywood and television film and television are obviously looking at Web3. They see original IP quickly accelerating to established IP. There's real metrics, there's real community here. So everyone's trying to figure out in a way, how do we get involved and within our own model? And then you have the other side, which is like the brands and the companies and also these merchandisers who are saying, we want to play in that space as well. So we find ourselves exactly in this middle position where we can leverage the intellectual property in a way that creates structure to allow both parties to interact in this space. So I think that this is just the beginning, and I do think it will be very lucrative as you start to get into microtransactions as well, where, for example, if I am a owner of a virtual cause sculpture, I can license that out to a virtual event for 24 hours. And now you can have a cause sculpture in your metaverse experience, and people get to experience it. And automatically, those rights revert at the end of the 24-hour period. And then somebody gets that little microtransaction. And so, as we start to get more interoperability between our assets, which is another part that I think is important to talk about, licensing in conjunction with assets and how those unlock, we're going to start to see a lot of these microtransactions and macro transactions as well.
I want to maybe ask you then to unpack a little bit more of that licensing and assets connection that you seem to be hinting at. But let me start with this, because I think a fun thought experiment I had that'll lead to a question that as I was thinking about this is like brands wanting to reach a certain demographic, and the forthcoming data that we'll eventually have in probably really streamlined ways about, okay, a dead fellas holder is likely to be XYZ demographically. Now, this is a more anonymous space, so whatever, but I think we will have a lot of that information. Or a World of Women holder typically looks like this, or, Bored Ape, or on and on. And now I'm a brand that wants to connect with or communicate to a particular demographic. Suddenly I want to go cast a dead fella because I'm trying to reach that audience. So it's not just how much existing interest is there in this right now, but also as everything about this space evolves, how will brands will interact with this in a new way? Do you think there's a world where in the future brands are like, yeah, I'm going to cast a dead fella instead of casting Gwyneth Paltrow or whatever, right? There's some huge NFT brand and they're like, there's more eyeballs or more really diehard engaged people interested in this NFT. So we're going to cast this for our commercial rather than XYZ celebrity. Like, is that the future you see here? Really, to either of you, Steven or Dennis?
I do believe that there will be NFTs that become, celebrities in their own right. We're moving from we're moving into a digital era where we interact with game characters. Mario from Super Mario Brothers is so identifiable that you can imagine that there will be projects and specific characters that people build massive brands around and use that as their identity and leverage it in many sorts of licensing opportunities. So I do believe that there will be some standouts that come out of this, and that's really through the efforts of how the IP holders treat that avatar. And you're starting to see it, as I said, through gaming and people identifying behind an avatar as opposed to being themselves, right?
Yeah, it almost feeling to them like a better reflection of who they feel their identity is than whatever their alternatives are. Do you want to speak a little bit more about licensing and assets and what you were getting at when you said that was maybe an important conversation to discuss what that looks like?
Well, so you have the base transaction layer of like, I'm going to license this the representation of my character to this other party. But with NFTs, what I think is really exciting is and embedding into the smart contract the ability to unlock master assets without having to send them out. Typically, what you see in a lot of these projects are somebody will say, well, we're going to give you the 3D asset in conjunction with your PFP, which is a 2D image. But now you're giving out that master asset that somebody has to now administer, right? So if you're going into another metaverse experience, you have to figure out, how do I load that avatar into that process? But what we see, and what I really believe is the future, is that you have that master NFT and you go into a metaverse experience that will unlock the ability to have you be that avatar without ever having to touch the master asset. And then now you have your 2D PFP, you've got your 3D, and that interoperability that'll come out of being able to jump into different metaverses and look at your digital identity through your wallet and go, these are your options, right? That you can pick from your, for your avatar or whatever those experiences will end up being. That's just very much on the surface at this point.
Let's turn to feature as a whole, y'all's company, this licensing marketplace, which I think is really exciting and unlocks a lot, is just one piece of what this overall vision is. Dennis, can you give folks a sense of what feature is holistically?
Sure, absolutely. We're coming at it that Feature is a Web3 studio that partners with the biggest creators, the biggest brands in the world, and then leverages that across meta, digital, and traditional media spaces. And so Huxley is our kind of initial tentpole case study project that we've launched with a digital artist, Ben Morrow, and that has been wildly successful, building a community, launching his art, his six issue comic book to the world, building a community. And so we think that is kind of just a jumping off point about what is possible within the new Web3 world, within this new media ecosystem, and the possibilities are endless.
So we'll talk more about Huxley, but Stephen, stepping even further back, like I think there's still debate around NFTs and blockchain and Hollywood. And there was actually recently an article that John sent me. I think he said he had sent it to you guys too, in the Ankler from the entertainment strategy guy, who's I guess has a big following, and he was sort of very dismissive of the potential for NFTs disrupting Hollywood, and he compared it to 3D printing, and he was like, this is basically just like merchandise and it's not that big and who cares. I don't think you guys agree with that. So I want to ask you, what is your big theory of the case as to what NFTs and the blockchain really represent or can be in the world of entertainment?
Technology has always influenced art and vice versa, right? And what I think people are not bringing into the equation is that people are digesting content in new ways, right? If you look at post or even during the pandemic, but really post pandemic, it really changed. I think the studio started realizing that they can be much more direct with their consumers, right? And being able to have the ability to launch a massive blockbuster film direct into someone's home is really what's changed the landscape. And then now, the way that people interact with content, but also in their own lives, like people are watching streaming content, they're talking on their phone with their friends, right? And people are also, even in Discord, engaging in a community simultaneously. And so I look at the future of entertainment to be really cross platform. And how do we engage the younger generation as well in the way that they're digesting content? There's such a sense of community around gaming, and even, they'll be watching a TV show, but they'll be talking with their friends on their mobile. And I think that's the way that I'm trying to frame and leverage Web3, which already has that built-in community and sense of ownership, and deconstruct from their narrative. So you're building the emotional connection to these characters and the narrative, but you're using multi-platform to engage them and including ownership into that equation and identity. And now I think you've got the sweet spot. And I think a lot of people don't even talk about that because not a lot of people are thinking about it in that way. They're just looking at it like, how are NFTs going to disrupt Hollywood? And it's the very one-dimensional sense of like, well, we're going to go raise money for a film. Like, that's Kickstarter, right?
Yeah. I want to build on what you just said. I had a long conversation with John Rogers yesterday. He's been on this show multiple times. Again, he's our mutual friend, and I want to very much make sure I do not get credit for what I'm about to say, because this is quite literally me parroting from him directly. But he was raising with me this concept of like architectural innovation. Like there are these things that are architectural innovations. Have you heard this term, or is he mentioned this to you specifically? Okay, so this is he's basically like it's an innovation that comes along, or a business strategic concept that comes along that requires these big companies that are succeeding at something to fundamentally restructure how they're doing that thing in order to compete at the top in the new world. So you mentioned like blockbuster movies. So he gave that example of like there was this restructuring that happened in the 1970s when, or I think it was the 70s, when film studios suddenly realized that instead of just releasing a bunch of movies through the year, they could actually make more money by putting a bunch of resources into releasing one massive blockbuster or a couple massive blockbusters in the summer. And the revenue they would make on that would sustain them for the rest of the year. And that was like a real strategic business shift that they underwent. And you've had a couple of those, streaming obviously being a huge one, where consumer behavior, it's either tapping into an existing consumer behavior or there's a consumer behavior shift that requires a shift in strategy. And I hear that it feels like that's what you're saying here is like consumer behaviors, especially among the younger generation, are changing, and they expect much more engagement. They expect to be on 3 platforms at once. They want to be talking to the creator of a show while they watch it or playing that game while it plays. Like there's an interconnectivity here that they expect, that is an opportunity for the entertainment industry folks who see that and tap into it. I guess like your reaction to that, does that feel right? Would you change anything about how you guys are thinking about it? Maybe Steven, just respond to that.
I think you're dead on. This is a fundamental paradigm shift, right? The blockchain for me is public infrastructure that has now leveled the playing field. And because of the democratization of the ability to make content, as you can see with YouTube and all of these platforms, you have so many content creators. We're used to engaging in all of these different platforms. And if you think about Twitter, I always make the analogy like Twitter is the lobby to the metaverse, right? It's a place that you can write a bunch of content, it goes out into the world, and you can go back and forth. But like as we all start to come out of the ice age of the digital revolution and really head into what will be the metaverse, these platforms will start to merge together, and so will the content. And you're seeing that from the traditional space in Hollywood, where there's this marriage between gaming as well with real-time technologies and also traditional filmmaking. And so it's only a matter of time before we start experiencing that content across all platforms. And John and I joke about transmedia being like a word that we had talked about for a long time in the early 2000s and on, but really we are at the forefront of that now, and we really can engage community and consumers, so to speak, across these platforms in new ways.
Living a bankless life requires taking control over your own private keys. And that's why so many in the Bankless Nation already have their Ledger hardware wallet. And brand new to the Ledger lineup of hardware wallets is the Ledger Nano S Plus, a huge upgrade to the world's most popular hardware wallet. With more memory and a larger screen, the Nano S Plus makes it easy to navigate and verify your transactions. And the paired Ledger Live desktop app gives you increased transparency as to what is about to happen with your NFT. What you see is what you sign. The Nano S Plus gives you the smoothest possible user experience while you're doing all of your crypto things. So go to the Ledger website to check out the features of the new Ledger Nano S Plus and join the waitlist to get yours. And don't forget about the Crypto Life card, also powered by Ledger. The CL card is a crypto debit card that hooks right into the Ledger Live app, right next to all the DeFi apps and services that you're already used to doing, like swapping tokens and staking. So if you don't have a Ledger hardware wallet, go to ledger.com, grab a Ledger, and take control over your crypto. It's increasingly obvious that everything will become tokenized, and NFT marketplaces needs robust financial reporting, performance analysis, and the peace of mind that they are compliance ready. GILDED's NFT Ops is a one-stop financial reporting solution for growing NFT platforms. GILDED has developed marketplace-specific modules to track the financial performance of NFT creators, including revenue tracking, collection metrics, royalty payments, and revenue share. Customers of NFT Ops gain full access to accounting tools and powerful APIs for custom integrations that simplify operations, streamline reporting, and produce tax-ready data. So no wonder why so many top brands like CoinMarketCap, Gitcoin, Nifty's, and POAP trust GILDED to automate complex reporting workflows. Visit gilded.finance/bankless to learn more.
Dennis, I'm curious, you come from an entrepreneurial finance background that, as far as I know, hasn't really touched Hollywood or entertainment specifically. Why did you want to dive in on this? What has excited you about this opportunity?
Yeah, well, after an investment banking background, I wanted to get into tech, right? Because that's where, all the interesting things were happening in the early 2010s. And so jumping in at TrueCar and going through a great rise there before they went public was a learning experience. And then building ZipRecruiter from a small business to 1,200 employees and hundreds of millions of dollars was a great experience. Helping small businesses hire, right, which is a pain point. So as I think about what I wanted to do in kind of this new age, Steve and I have been kicking around ideas for a number of years and started to kind of zero in on the blockchain and entertainment applications. Kind of the beginning of last year, I don't think many many people or companies were focused on that. And so that's where we started kind of zeroing in on how can we help artists, how can we help creators with this new medium, and how we can start to build solutions for them. And that's where I think what's really interesting about it is, as we talk about these overarching changes to the media ecosystem, it really comes down to a few things, right? Having a direct relationship with your customers, right? I laugh that HBO, for most of their existence, never had a relationship with the customer, right? And now that's changed through streaming, right? Where they've had to actually take credit cards and deliver a product, and work with customers. Web3 is very much focused on directly, working with the community, and building the community and giving them a sense of ownership and engagement. And as we started digging into this, you see that these communities are just amazing sources of inspiration and love and admiration. It's very positive environment to be working in, and we see this a lot with Huxley, and we're really proud of the community that we fostered, and the friends that we've made, and the experiences that we've been through in just the short period of time. And this is the type of engagement that you don't usually get in working at companies and being this close to your customer. And they're truly partners in what we're doing, and it's a fun, it's exciting space, and the feedback loop is really interesting. When we're on Discord, like when we're launching something, our fans and customers and partners, they're telling us what's going on, how they're feeling, if they're enjoying it. And that could be really stressful, but it's also really really exciting. And I think we're just at the beginning of how a lot of this is playing out. And this is like the experimentation phase, but the bar keeps getting set higher. More and more experienced teams keep coming into the space, keep launching. I think everyone's collective ambition in this space is getting bigger. You see what happened in the last few weeks with Proof, and what's upcoming with Yuga Labs. And I mean, these are going to be defining moments in the Web3 ecosystem. You see with Coinbase coming in with their NFT marketplace launch, right? Like the talent, the energy that's coming into the space is just awe-inspiring, and that's a little bit of what Steven and I really like about this space and why we enjoy building here.
Let's take a beat on Huxley now, since we haven't fully deep dived on it. I think you mentioned this. This is a project whose creator is really Ben Morrow. I have that name pronunciation right? This is just a day of me not having pre-checked my pronunciations before we got on this call. The theme of this episode. And you had the Huxley Genesis token, which I know we don't want to hyper focus on floor price, but I think is sitting just under 3 ETH right now. After I'm sure a launch that was much less expensive than that, so it had some growth there. Congratulations. And then he's released, has it been 6 comic books so far that Ben has released as part of this Huxley drop? And how does the Genesis token tie into that? Maybe Steven, if you want to just provide some color around Huxley along those lines.
So with Huxley, it's exciting because what would have traditionally been a normal publishing deal with a graphic novel that was in 6 parts of a comic. We wanted to bring that to Web3 to leverage community and also quickly accelerate an original IP with a kind of core community of Ben, and then bring that to established IP and really prove the model that you can accelerate something into Hollywood where that there's a real viable intellectual property and story, right? Like that's the thing here. And that's one of the big differences is a lot of people are releasing just, I would say, minimum viable IP, right? And then building in story down the line. And Ben had spent 10 years building this from the ground up. And so it was really important that when we launched, we not only delivered a great product for the comic books and how that tied into physicals, but also it was important for us that there were tokenomics that engaged the Web3 space. And so part of that structure was, how do we get people to use their comics, create deflationary mechanisms to ultimately get avatars, right? Or other components that they wanted to go further into the IP, but really, again, coming back to there is a story here, and that is the entry point. And we've always stuck by that because I don't want to take you to the gift shop unless you've been on the ride. So we built the tokenomics, and there had been some good case studies out there of people, that had been exploring ways to use an NFT and burning and staking and things like that. But we wanted to really derive something that used the comic book to ultimately bridge you into an avatar. So we created a mechanism where you had to collect 5 issue ones, and then you would burn 2 to ultimately get a Genesis token. And the Genesis token was the token that would allow you to create, or you would use it to get a Huxley robot.
Okay. I want to pause on the line you had there because you said a lot, but I'm like, that really hit me was I don't want to take you to the gift shop if you haven't been on the ride. It feels like most of what's happening in this space right now in our somewhat immature stage is everyone is asking me to come to the gift shop and buy things with the promise that there's a ride I'll get to go on at some point. It seems like that's intentional. That's what you guys observed as being a problem in the space. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I mean, look, you in Hollywood, right? You have to sell the story. It's all about story. If there's no story, there's no there. And I spent 15 years of my life going through that process and learning what it meant to actually like deliver a story and product that people would want to buy and make movies out of. And so there's a real craft there. And I think that's what's really interesting about the market right now is it's getting to a point of maturation where now people have to build. So what are you building? Like, what's your
Yeah.
expertise? Has that team done that before? Have you built a metaverse experience before? Have you even touched Unreal? Like, we're at that level now, and there are people with a lot of war chests that can go out there. But what they don't know is that there's a shortage of creators, and really good creators are really hard to get,
Yeah.
um, especially if there's no story.
Okay, you mentioned Unreal, which was the trigger word for me to dive in with you for just a minute here, because this has been something I've been wanting to look into in greater detail because I've now heard it. I've heard Unreal over and over again from people I've interviewed or online, and my understanding of it is like it's this awesome tool that allows us to build more like realistic images, and it matters for the metaverse. But like I'm woefully underinformed about what Unreal Engine means and its significance. I'm so excited you're here, Steven, to give people a little context. You've worked in virtual production for many years in Hollywood. You worked on the Polar Express, which was groundbreaking for its time in terms of how realistic the characters looked and how real it felt for animation. So you're very well poised. You're very qualified to speak on the evolution and the advancements we're making in terms of, I don't know, realism in the metaverse, realism in on our screens. Why is Unreal Engine 5 a big deal? Why are people so excited about Unreal Engine?
Well, okay, that's thank you for that. That's a big question too, and I think the way to look at it is we have the concept of the metaverse, which we're very far away from having hundreds of thousands of people in a shared space, the Ready Player One kind of world. And but we are not far away from the technology providers that are out there that are building the tools and the fundamental engines to run these types of experiences. And so I think a lot of people, you have things like Cyber.io, which are like these kind of low poly experiences that you can start to engage community inside of them. There are these pixel art based apps that allow a bunch of people to share a space there. So there has been exploration of how do we get as many people as possible into a shared experience. But there, in my opinion, and there are very few companies that have the technical prowess and have the understanding that can actually build what we would consider a metaverse. And Epic has been at the forefront of video game technologies, being able to power IP through real time and also the quality level that they're able to hit with Unreal 5. So what we're seeing is, in the Matrix there was the architect the white room where you could really load anything. And I think that's the most valuable way to look at it, is because you can build anything in Unreal 5, right? And that's the foundation of your metaverse experience. And so because those tools exist, they are out for free. You will start to see more photorealistic gaming experiences and more photorealistic multiplayer and even film production experiences, because they're looking at it as you can use our real-time technologies to impact filmmaking. So, for example, on The Mandalorian, you had foreground characters that were real, you had environments in the front that were real, and then everything in the background was done using real-time game engines and camera tracking. So they're already starting to take over the live action space, and they've been a pioneer, obviously, in the video game side. And that synergy is what is really going to start to create these different types of experiences, but also pioneering into the metaverse.
That is so helpful
I
and
hope.
really exciting. No, it totally is. I think I don't think I'm alone out there. I think there are probably other people who have seen this term floating around and vaguely understand that it's relevant to people who really care about how the metaverse is being built, but really didn't kind of know why. One final question, speaking historically on this. So Epic Games, people probably know from Fortnite. They made Fortnite. I heard, and I'm curious if this is true, that Fortnite was almost really just meant to be like a test for Unreal Engine. Like Epic has really been excited about Unreal Engine, and that's like their core product. And then Fortnite, it's like, well, we have to build a game to test Unreal Engine, and like it had this crazy success, but it almost was more a byproduct of their focus on Unreal Engine. Do you happen to know if that's true?
I don't know if that's true, but
Okay.
yeah, in any of these studios, they're always trying to leverage um new mechanics and new tools, and obviously there's nothing better to do that with than IP, right? Pixar really, I think, pioneered that, where they were trying to build new tool sets. So they would say, well, let's do a movie with fur, right? So let's go do Monsters Inc. And they would
Mm,
build that new sort of tool
mm.
set that would be justified through the intellectual property. And of course, the story is great, but like, you're building your IP library essentially for the company.
Let me ask your goals as a company, and Dennis, I'll ask you. Are you? Is it like we want to be the next Disney? This is the opportunity to dethrone these old players who aren't going to catch on fast enough. Oh, full stop there. Is that the goal, or is there another one you would articulate?
Become the next Disney. That's a big a big
You're like, we have Huxley. Relax.
yeah. I mean,
We're
I
getting
think
there.
there's opportunity to create the next Disney, right? It's not going to be like, it's not going to look like Disney. It's going to be different, and it's going to be um, kind of leveraging new technologies. It's going to be building in a different way, and that's what, like, I think is exciting. Like, our goal is to build up portfolios of IP and experiences, and by partnering with the best brands and creators in the world. And so when you think about that, and you think about the potential financing structures, and how the money flows, and how NFTs enable that, and then the experiences that you can build, I think that's where, like, the opportunity is. And so if you fast forward 10 years, and there's 10 or 20 Huxley type projects at that scale, and bigger, and now those projects are starting to mature. You have a Huxley movie out, you have the Huxley video game launched, you have other projects that are starting to mature as well. Then that gives us a lot of flexibility in how we grow. But I think it's first and foremost is, like, just with, like, most media companies, is thinking about how you engage and your audience, and how you create different experiences. And that's what I think is really interesting.
Y'all certainly aren't alone in your undertaking. I've interviewed others. Tom Bilyeu is building a studio. Similar ambitions, I would say, and similar focus areas. And it feels like every day I see a new folks coming a lot out of Hollywood to set up a new Web3 empower creators studio thing. I'm curious how you think that plays out, and what your impression of this landscape is right now, the competitive landscape. Uh, that's one question, and then the quick follow up to that would be: do you think in a year or in some time frame we see a lot of these studios just start buying companies like yours? Does Disney start buying these because they're like, it's Nike with Artifact? They're like, God, we're not going to figure out how to build this in house, so we're going to start acquiring players who seem to understand it better. Steven, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think that studios will start looking at the players in the space and seeing where there's value in really what the talent is there, right? It's the understanding of how the Web3 ecosystem works, but also how the technologies interact, and people who have a fundamental understanding of the paradigm shift and how it changes the development cycle, the pre-production cycle, and the production cycle. And I think when, what's unique about Feature is we have that experience, with Dennis coming from the finance side and myself coming from, the technology and overall entertainment production. That we can leverage, these assets that we're building in new ways that have a dramatic impact on the overall production cost, and how the engagement and the content really flows back into the Web3 ecosystem. So I definitely see people, people are coming to us already. There's some partners that we can't talk about, but like are very well known in the space, who are leveraging our experience in bringing them into the Web3 space. So we're really excited about those. And I think it's just going to continue to grow. And we think that with companies like Epic and other large studios that want to explore this space, there's going to just be a continuing growing interest. The competitive landscape is an interesting question. I'm, I
I'm
think,
looking for dirt. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, no, I think, no, it's interesting because you have all these companies that have a big war chest, but their area of expertise doesn't necessarily create the best solution to be competitive in the space. Because it's one thing to have money and it's one thing to know how to use that money in actual production. And you can buy it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to push the conversation forward and how we're digesting that content. And I think that's important here. You can't just go make a movie, right? Because it's got to feed the Web3 ecosystem too. And so there's a symbiotic relationship between what you're creating and how it ultimately impacts your community. And that's really important to understand.
You both have touched on in various ways recruiting and hiring, and Steven, you mentioned, probably a lot of people in this space waking up one day to realize like they don't have the talent they need in the storytelling, or that that it's hard to come by that. So writers and storytellers being one area that we maybe need more of in Web3. Are there other hires you're trying to make right now or struggling with, or other skill sets that you're like, we need this and we need some of this?
Absolutely. I mean, there's, as we think about scaling the business, there's hiring needs in basically, every department, from engineering and Solidity developers and marketing and product and story and copy and, across the board. But I think like part of this is tied to the natural evolution of, kind of high growth industries, right? Like the premise has been shown, right, that you can build big businesses in this space. Companies are doing it, right? And then that kind of starts the flywheel of attracting more, more and more talent into the ecosystem. So there's a big education piece, but there's talent needs across the board for anyone that's out there thinking about getting into Web3. Let us know.
We're here. Um, Huxley is your tentpole, your flagship project. Are there others on the horizon that you can speak about, share with the community on? Steven, you're smiling, which has put you in the hot seat. Any alpha you want to share here for the good viewers of Overpriced JPEGs?
Oh man, I really wish I could. We have something that is really exciting with definitely the top creators in the world. And it's going to be a mind-blowing experience. We're so excited about its potential, and it is complex, but the experience is really the apex of what we've been talking about this entire time, from licensing to cross-platform engagement, top technology, top creators, and just something that you haven't experienced before, but will be engaged.
Oh my
And
gosh.
we will definitely take you on the ride before the gift shop. So
Okay, when do we all get to learn more? It's a
there's an echo
big
there.
that's some big hype to drop without any sense of a time frame.
Dennis, when will we learn more?
A few months.
Yeah.
A few
Oh,
months.
that's a couple years in Web3 time. Come on, you're killing me. Uh, well, that's very exciting. Dennis, I think earlier you maybe wanted to jump in on the question around competitive landscape. Is there something you want to add to that convo?
Yeah, I mean, Carly, I know you're looking for dirt, but like,
I'm mostly kidding.
yeah, I mean, I think like how I view it is like there's not like yes, there's competitors and there's lots of different companies that are trying to grow in this space. But I think what's special about it, we're so early, is that everybody is trying new things. Everybody else is watching those things, see how they work, going back, refining their, kind of product strategy. And so it's a really amazing ecosystem of everybody watching everybody else and everybody trying to kind of see what worked and what didn't and put another spin on it and try something different. So it's this really, I think unique time in the industry where there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of experimenting, and generally everyone, is positive about the, what everyone is doing around growth. And so I think that's just going to continue to raise the bar and continue to lead to new kind of awesome experiences.
I do think writ large we're in a lovely moment in the industry, which is sort of for twofold. It's still early, obviously, we say that all the time. So it's everyone's just excited to have anybody else who like recognizes this for what it is. We're all like, okay, cool, I'm not alone and I'm not crazy. So like we're that like that feels good. And then I think I interviewed Amanda Cassatt, who was the CMO for Consensus for a number of years, and she told me something that I haven't fact checked, but sounds true, which is that blockchain is actually one of the only industries, call it, that's really growing, specifically looking at the US, and that some of the low interest rates we've had and that has enabled a lot of investment and VC money to flow around has masked that fact. But that really blockchain is definitely one of the sectors that's growing as fast as it is. And I think that breeds like healthy competition because we all feel like the pie is growing. Like there's room for a lot of us and we feel that sense of growth. So obviously we all want to win and do, whatever. But like it doesn't feel like a zero sum game or like you get that sense that there's room for a lot of players in this space. And I think that's awesome and something I love about it.
Yeah, I think
I
that's right.
mean, when else have you had the experience of a currency being adopted while a network was also being adopted at the same time? And I think that's what's really interesting here is that you're having a cryptocurrency adoption, people are moving into that, but you're also building essentially apps onto a decentralized computer.
Yeah.
And how that flows is really interesting. I don't think we really have any models that we can compare to that at this point, but that's part of the maturation of the space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the excitement of, and I made this point in a recent episode that I don't know when it'll all air, but like this platform layer being something that anyone can invest in, like the platform layers that were being built in the early internet, like there wasn't a way to invest in the internet per se. You invested in companies, and then you needed to be an accredited investor, which like you couldn't just be a lay person getting in on the early round of Facebook. You can be, if you have an internet connection, you can get in on Ethereum at the platform. So that I think also is just exciting. Like there's real opportunity here without having to be like an angel investor. And people make a lot of like, oh, the VCs are making all the money. Yeah, and VCs are doing very well, and they're this isn't the utopia that everyone would maybe want, but it's still a hell of a lot better than a lot of what we've seen historically. Okay. Final question, future predictions. I know it's big. I don't know. Let's do, Steven, where would you want to see Feature? It's 3 years from now. It's a year from now. What is Feature doing? What are you excited about?
I'm excited to move NFTs off the computer and onto the couch.
Oh, that's a PR line right there. That's an excellent line. You got your new tagline for Feature. Off the computer onto your couch. We are Feature. Dennis, hard to top that. What do you got?
Not that, but I mean, I think like what I really like about what we're building and the opportunity is the chance to rethink things and to rethink assumptions that were, maybe conventional wisdom in Hollywood, where from my background it's 180 degrees the other way, conventional wisdom, right? Like the ways to create new models, the ways to empower creators with ownership of the project and royalties, and these new kind of dynamics and new ways to shape business models, shape how you go to market, and shape the customer experience, which are different and new. And I think that's what we're exploring, and that's what's most exciting to me.
Love it. Steven, Dennis, thank you both so much for coming, hanging out, talking about all this. We didn't even really get into like breaking down the old Hollywood models and what decentralization can mean on the good side of that and the bad side. So you'll have to come back and we'll unpack all of that. But it's a busy day for all of us, so I know we gotta bounce. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Carly.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.